For our speaker. Okay. As most of you know, Reverend Carol and I are avid Beatle fans. So I had to play that one, the one she suggested, before I introduced her. So Reverend Carol was ordained here in the Center of Enlightenment in 2015. That's what I thought. I didn't write it down. Reverend Carol has extensive background in spiritual counseling, metaphysics, prayer and meditation practices, and pastoral care, which Gina and I can attest to. That was a wonderful class. She co-taught with her friend, Reverend Peggy. She also, in addition to youth and family ministry, she is an accomplished spiritual teacher, public speaker, and event planner. She also has been a wonderful mentor to me, and I'm sure to others. So please help me welcome Reverend Carol to the podium.
Thank you, Reverend Lisa. It was no small chore getting Lisa to the finish line, and that's not, criticizing her. That's just the way the task goes. It takes quite a bit of time. And then we had the 2 years worth of pandemic, which was an interruption. So that prolonged it even more. So I was like a proud mother the day of her ordination. So good morning, and thank you all for coming this morning. It's wonderful to see you here, and I'm so happy that you're going to join me. I've been thinking about this talk for some time, and I know it's an important subject for us these days. So one thing we all know is that life is always changing. These last few years have shown this to be true for all of us. We have witnessed experiences come and go. People come into our lives and pass out of our lives. Possessions are gained and lost. Our jobs, work, and life purposes have changed. We have noticed that everything in this life is temporary. Hear that. Everything in this life is temporary and lasts for only a certain time for us to enjoy, honor, and appreciate. Then change happens. Change is not always a bad thing. It depends on how we deal with it. For some, change is devastating. Even good change can be devastating to some. Others welcome it. They seem to just breeze right through change. I've always had a challenge with change. It's only in my later years that I've been able to step through change much easier than I used to. So change is not always a bad thing, but sometimes it is. Losing a home in a fire may devastate some people, but not others. You see on TV, people will say, well, we're going to rebuild and we're going to start immediately. Or you see people standing there watching their house slide off, the cliff into the mudslide. And they're crying, but they say, we're going to rebuild right here. And you think, really? You might be standing here watching the next house slide off the hill. I don't know. But I always admire them, to take a stand like that. In the pews is a printout of the 7 stages of grief, and you might want to grab it. It's at the end. Chris, did you get one? Just take the one from the second pew. There. Thank you, Lisa. Sometimes change leaves us with a state of grief and loss, as in the death of a loved one, or the loss of a pet, the loss of a job, our house burns down, we're in a car accident. So let's look at the printout. And this lesson is not meant to depress you. As we go farther through this, it's meant to help you and to help me. So the first stage is shock and denial. You will probably react to learning of the loss with numbed disbelief. You may deny the reality of the loss at some level in order to avoid the pain. Shock promotes emotional protection from being overwhelmed all at once. This may last for weeks. For some people, it lasts for months. For others, it lasts for years. And the ones that really can't cope, it lasts a lifetime. And I'm not making a judgment whether that's good or bad. I'm just saying that's how people deal with it. Number 2, pain and guilt. As the shock wears off, it is replaced with the suffering of unbelievable pain. Although excruciating and almost unbearable, it is important that you experience the pain fully and not hide it, avoid it, or escape from it with alcohol or drugs. Many years ago, I was engaged to a fellow we had dated 4.5 years. And he died suddenly from heart issues. And people would say to me, "How do you feel?" And I'd say to them, "I feel like a donut with a big hole in the middle. And I don't feel like that hole is going to fill up anytime soon." It took me 6 years to get over that because I was so emotionally sensitive. 3 days after his death, I was back at my desk at work, and my boss said to me, "Go home." I said, "I don't want to go home. I can't sit there by myself. I can't do it. I need to have something to do. I'll be all right. Just let me be and let me work at my own pace. I'll be fine." You may have guilty feelings or remorse over things you did or didn't do with your loved one. Life feels chaotic and scary during this phase. So these 7 stages of grief we can experience those even if we're not talking about the death of a loved one. We lose our job. We lose our home. People move away. We move away. There's all kinds of things that we can consider to be a loss, and we grieve over that, whether it's something big or something little. The year I had to put my Zoe down, my little dog, and she was at the end of her life, that devastated me. She was my best buddy. I throw her a kiss every night before I go to sleep. And she's been gone 4 years now. I will never forget that little stinker. Anger and bargaining. Frustration gives way to anger, and you may lash out and lay unwarranted blame for the death on someone else. Please try to control this, as permanent damage to your relationships may result. This is a time for the release of bottled up emotion. For me, it's the emotional part of this equation that always gets me in trouble. Because grief is not really a mental thing. It's an emotional thing. And you can try to think yourself through it, and that's important. But you also have to honor how you feel emotionally. Another thing we do is we ask the question, why me? And that doesn't get us anywhere because there's no answer to that question. Take my word for it. I asked that question many times. And there are other questions that in a loss may never be answered. And you have to accept that you're never going to get an answer, because you'll drive yourself crazy trying to get one. So we have to leave that alone. Number 4, depression, reflection, loneliness. Just when your friends may think you should be getting on with your life, a long period of sad reflection will likely overtake you. This is a normal stage of grief, so do not be talked out of it by well-meaning outsiders. Encouragement from others is not helpful to you during the stage of grieving. And you know why they do that? Because they're uncomfortable with you grieving. You are not the person they know because you're grieving. And they only have a certain amount of patience to deal with that. So if they try to push you along, you can just say, thank you very much, but I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. Okay, so let's go on to number 5, the upward turn. As you start to adjust your life without your dear one or without the thing that you lost, your life becomes a little calmer and more organized. Your physical symptoms lessen and depression begins to lift slightly. And when they talk about physical symptoms, you feel foggy. Some people actually get sick. It's like you may not have any energy. Because your emotions will find a place to live in your body. All right, so that's why it's important to continue to take care of yourself. Get enough sleep, get enough to eat, get enough water, get enough exercise. Number 6, reconstruction and working through. As you become more functional, your mind starts working again, and you will find yourself seeking realistic solutions to problems posed by life without your loved one or without the thing that you lost. You will start to work on practical and financial problems and reconstructing yourself and your life without whatever it was that you lost, whether it was a person or a thing or a circumstance. The very last stage is acceptance and hope. During this, the last of 7 stages in this grief model, you will learn to accept and deal with the reality of your situation. Acceptance does not necessarily mean instant happiness. Given the pain and turmoil you have experienced, you can never return to the carefree, untroubled you that existed before this tragedy, but you will find a way forward. And that's the whole point of acceptance. You will find a way forward. The other evening, I was watching a program called Craft in America on PBS. It's a fascinating show about arts and crafts within different cultures. And I'm just fascinated by it. And they talk about everything. So in the show, there was a segment on Japanese Americans who were sent to detention facilities after World War II. At first, these folks were sent to short-term detention centers called assembly centers. These were located at fairgrounds and racetracks on the West Coast in California and Washington State. They lived in horse stalls that had been cleaned out, whitewashed. The floors were dirt. They had straw mattresses, and they had to put up with that leftover odor of the horses. They stayed here for a few weeks to a few months, and then they were transformed to 10 concentration camps located in the California desert or the Arkansas swamplands. They lived in barracks with communal bathrooms, laundry, and dining halls. Often there was only one light bulb in a room for 7 people. The Japanese took on much of the work to keep the camps running. They prepared and served the food. They chopped the firewood. They beautified the barren surroundings by gardening and making a variety of furniture and decorative items. They taught each other skills of art and crafts. These items have been passed down to their descendants as mementos of the time spent in the camps, and they call it camp art. And I even saw an Antiques Roadshow, somebody had bought a piece of this a few decades ago, and it's quite highly revered, not just because the piece was beautiful, it was a piece of furniture, but because of the craftsmanship. And that's passed down from generation to generation. The Japanese people lost their way of life here in America because of a fearful government. They didn't do anything, but because of Pearl Harbor, they were gathered up by a fearful government and put in a place where they could do us no harm, except the government did them harm. However, that being said, the Japanese people took steps to recreate another way of life while they were in the camps. The Japanese people arrived at a place of acceptance and created for themselves the best life they could with what they had to work with. We've all experienced change and loss in our lifetime. How do we get to a place of acceptance? My suggestion is work the natural progression of the grief process. You will go through those 7 steps naturally. You don't have to force them. That's just how it works for all of us. And I would say to you and to myself, keep putting one foot in front of the other. Even baby steps are moving forward. Take time to pray and meditate. Journal your feelings and thoughts. Putting your anger and hurt on paper is better than bottling it up inside of you. Gather your circle of friends and family to support you, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Know that God is always with you, even in this situation where it's a devastating loss. God has never deserted you. And you will be healed. You will. It just takes time as we know it. What do they say? Time heals all wounds. Acceptance doesn't mean we like or agree with what has happened. Acceptance means we are willing to move forward in spite of what has happened. Acceptance means we are non-resistant toward loss and change because we are resilient spiritual beings having a human experience. We are more than our human self, and we are more than our experiences. We're spiritual beings, creations of God, and we have all that we need to move forward as life changes, as life throws us curves, as things become temporary that have looked permanent. We are mighty and powerful beings. In closing, I'd like to share with you a couple of Bible quotes. One of my favorites comes from Matthew chapter 6. This would be from the Sermon on the Mount. These are Jesus's words. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. No one can take our memories from us. No one can take our inner thoughts and feelings from us. No matter what we lose out here, we always have that inner experience, and that stays with us. When I am feeling lonely because Zoe's not with me, I start to remember things that we used to do. She loved to walk through the park. She loved to play this silly game where she would get one of her squeaky toys and she'd run through the house squeaking it, and I'd say, "Give me that, give me that." And she'd just run and I'd chase her and we'd run around. It was so much fun. But I remember those things because it helps me to be okay and to be calm and be in a place of acceptance that even though she's not here anymore, I still love her and I can still remember her and the things that we did together. And the last quote I would like to share with you comes from the book of Joel, chapter 2, verse 25. And these are the words of God. "I will restore to you the years that the swarming locusts have eaten." I will restore to you the years the swarming locusts have eaten. So when we move forward, restoration starts to happen. And we see a new way of life blossom for ourselves. It may not be the same, but it can be good. We can be happy again. We can feel life is fulfilling. And we open ourselves to new experiences, new people, new opportunities, new joys. And it's all good. It's all good. Thank you for joining me this morning. I appreciate you listening, and I hope this has been helpful to you. God bless you.